For many fans of classic American TV, the show Laverne and Shirley is remembered as one of the funniest sitcoms of its time. It followed two best friends trying to live, work, and survive in a busy city life. But what made the show even more special were two strange, funny characters who always showed up at the worst or best times. Their names were Lenny and Squiggy. Years later, the people behind the show, including Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, finally open up about how these two characters were created. Their story is not just about comedy. It is about surprise talent, lucky moments, and the power of simple ideas turning into something big. The story of Lenny and Squiggy did not begin in a studio or a casting room. It started in a simple house party. Friends, actors, and writers were all gathered in a relaxed setting. There were no cameras and no scripts. It was just people laughing and talking freely. Penny Marshall, who was hosting, had no idea that this normal evening would become part of television history. Among the guests were two young comedians, David Lander and Michael McKean. They were already known for their comedy work, but that night, something special happened. They started acting out strange, funny characters on the spot. Their movements, voices, and timing were so unusual that everyone in the room stopped and watched. The room went from casual laughter to full attention in seconds. In that moment, Lenny and Squiggy were born. They were not planned. They were not written. They were simply created in real time through performance and imagination. Cindy Williams later remembered how shocking it was. She said it felt like watching something completely new. The two men did not just act funny. They became their characters fully. Their energy was fast, unpredictable, and extremely entertaining. This was a kind of moment that cannot be trained or rehearsed. It felt natural, like it was always meant to happen. Penny Marshall also saw something special. She believed these two characters could work perfectly in a TV show at that time. Laverne and Shirley was already becoming popular. The show focused on two working-class women trying to build their lives while dealing with friendship, jobs, and everyday problems. But the creators felt something was missing. The producer and director, Gary Marshall, wanted more energy and surprise in the show. He needed characters who could break normal scenes and add chaos in a fun way. Penny Marshall told her brother Gary about the two comedians she saw at the party. The next step was simple. They invited David Lander and Michael McKean to the set. There were no long auditions or tests. They just wanted them to do what they had already done at the party. When Lander and McKean arrived on set, something amazing happened. The moment they started performing, it felt just like the house party again. Their timing was perfect. Their jokes landed naturally. And the crew could not stop laughing. The characters they played, Lenny and Squiggy, fit perfectly into the world of Laverne and Shirley. They were loud, strange, and unpredictable, but they also felt real in their own funny way. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall noticed that every time these characters entered a scene, the energy of the whole show changed. It became louder, funnier, and more exciting. One reason Lenny and Squiggy became so popular is because they were different from everything else on TV at the time. They did not follow normal behavior rules. They walked in unexpectedly, said strange things, and reacted in unusual ways. But behind all the chaos was control. The actors knew exactly what they were doing. Every pause, every look, and every movement was carefully timed. It looked like randomness, but it was actually skill. Gary Marshall understood this very well. He knew that comedy works best when there is a balance. Too much chaos becomes noise. Too little becomes boring. Lenny and Squiggy were the perfect middle point. Even though they were funny characters, Lenny and Squiggy had a purpose in the story. They represented disruption. Every time they entered a calm or emotional scene, things changed immediately. They would break serious moments with jokes. They would interrupt conversations. And sometimes they would create even more emotional impact by making the scene feel unpredictable. This made the show feel alive. Viewers never knew what would happen next. That surprise factor kept people watching. Years later, Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall both spoke about their experience on the show. They often described Lenny and Squiggy as a gift they never expected. Cindy said it felt like watching lightning in a bottle. Penny said they brought a kind of energy that could not be planned or replaced. Both actresses agreed that the show would not have been the same without them. Even though the main story focused on friendship and life struggles, Lenny and Squiggy added something unpredictable that made everything more fun. Even today, Lenny and Squiggy are remembered as some of the most unique sitcom characters ever created. Their style influenced many comedy shows that came after them. They showed that sometimes the best ideas do not come from planning. They come from moments of pure creativity, when people are free to experiment and just be funny. Their story also shows how important timing and opportunity are in entertainment. One simple night at a house party changed television history forever. The story of Lenny and Squiggy is more than just a comedy memory. It is a reminder that great ideas can come from unexpected places. A casual moment between friends turned into one of the most memorable parts of Laverne and Shirley. Thanks to the vision of Cindy Williams, Penny Marshall, Gary Marshall, and the talent of David Lander and Michael McKean, two small characters became a lasting part of TV history. Sometimes, the smallest moments create the biggest changes. That is exactly what happened with Lenny and Squiggy in Laverne and Shirley. What began as a simple greeting, just a hello, slowly turned into one of the most remembered comedy entrances in television history. But behind that moment was careful timing, creative risk, and a group of people who trusted something unusual. The creators, including Gary Marshall, understood that comedy is not only about jokes. It is also about timing, surprise, and contrast. Lenny and Squiggy were designed to break the normal flow of scenes. They were not meant to fit in smoothly. They were meant to shake things up. First, Lenny and Squiggy were not expected to become major characters. They were simply added for extra comedy. But something changed once they appeared on screen. Their energy was so strong that even short scenes became memorable. The actors behind them, Michael McKean and David Lander, had a natural chemistry. They understood each other without needing long explanations. This made their performances feel alive and spontaneous, even though they were carefully planned. Every time they entered a scene, viewers paid attention, not because they were loud, but because they were unpredictable. You never knew what they would say or do next. What made Lenny and Squiggy different from other comedy characters was their style. They did not rely on normal conversation or realistic behavior. Instead, they used strange body language, unusual pauses, and exaggerated expressions. First glance, it looked like chaos. But in reality, it was controlled performance. Every movement had a purpose. Every pause created tension before a joke landed. This balance between control and randomness made them unforgettable. The writers of Laverne and Shirley quickly realized that these characters could not be treated like normal side roles. They needed space to appear suddenly and disappear just as fast. That unpredictability became part of their identity. Audiences loved Lenny and Squiggy because they broke expectations. In a show that often focused on everyday struggles and friendships, these two characters added surprise energy. Viewers would wait for their entrance. The moment the door creaked or the music shifted slightly, people knew something funny was about to happen. That anticipation became part of the experience. Even though their screen time was limited, their impact was huge. Sometimes, only a few seconds were enough to change the mood of an entire episode. One of the smartest decisions in the show's production was how carefully Lenny and Squiggy were used. They were not in every scene. They were brought in at specific moments to create contrast. Penny Marshall once described it as controlled chaos. That means everything looked wild and random, but in reality, it was carefully planned. The timing of their entrances, exits, and jokes was all part of a bigger design. This balance kept the audience engaged. Too much chaos would feel overwhelming. Too little would feel boring. Lenny and Squiggy sat exactly in the middle. Even decades later, Lenny and Squiggy are still talked about in discussions about classic television comedy. They're often used as examples of how small roles can become iconic when done correctly. Their success shows an important lesson. Great characters do not always need complex stories. Sometimes personality, timing, and originality are enough. They also show how important trust is in creative work. The producers trusted the actors. The actors trusted their instincts. And the audience trusted the show to keep surprising them. The impact of Lenny and Squiggy goes beyond one show. They influence how future sitcoms approach supporting characters. Many later comedy shows began adding unpredictable side characters to break tension and increase humor. The legacy of Laverne and Shirley is not just about its main story. It is also about how it embraced creativity and allowed unexpected ideas to grow. Thanks to the work of Cindy Williams, Penny Marshall, Gary Marshall, and talented performers like David Lander and Michael McKean, television comedy gained two of its most unusual and beloved characters. And in the end, all came back to something simple: a spontaneous idea, a shared laugh, and a single unforgettable hello. On screen, Lenny and Squiggy looked like pure chaos. But behind the cameras of Laverne and Shirley, things were much more structured than viewers ever realized. Every funny moment that seemed random was actually shaped by careful planning, timing, and teamwork. The creators, especially Gary Marshall, believed comedy worked best when it felt natural. So instead of controlling every detail, he gave performers room to experiment. That freedom allowed characters like Lenny and Squiggy to grow beyond expectations. Actors David Lander and Michael McKean often approached their scenes differently from traditional sitcom actors. Instead of repeating the same performance, they explored small changes each time. They would try different pauses, different movements, and even slightly different tones. This made every take feel fresh. The crew never knew exactly what would happen next, even though the script stayed the same. That unpredictability kept the energy alive on set. It also helped the comedy feel more real, even when the characters were acting in exaggerated ways. One of the reasons Lenny and Squiggy worked so well is because of how the main cast reacted to them. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall often had to stay in character while trying not to laugh. That struggle made scenes even funnier. Viewers at home could sense that something unexpected was happening. The reactions felt real because they often were real. Sometimes, a scene had to be res hot simply because the laughter on set became too strong. This showed how powerful the characters had become, not just in the script, but in the moment. One of the most famous parts of Lenny and Squiggy was not just what they said, but how they entered a scene. It could be a simple door opening, a strange walk, or even just a pause before speaking. These entrances were carefully built over time. What looked spontaneous was actually refined through repetition and timing adjustments. The goal was always the same: surprise the audience in the first second. Once that surprise worked, the joke had a much stronger impact. Even a simple word like hello could become funny when delivered at the perfect moment. Many comedy characters lose their impact after a while, but Lenny and Squiggy stayed popular. The reason was simple: they were never predictable. The writers of Laverne and Shirley used them carefully. They did not appear too often, and they were never placed in the same type of situation twice in a row. This kept the audience excited. Every appearance felt like a small event. People never knew what version of Lenny and Squiggy they were going to get. The heart of their success was timing. Not just comedic timing, but also production timing. The right actors, the right writers, and the right creative freedom all came together at the right moment. Gary Marshall understood that great comedy cannot be forced. It has to be discovered. That is why he allowed space for improvisation and surprise. Without that decision, Lenny and Squiggy might have stayed small characters. Instead, they became a lasting part of television history. Lenny and Squiggy were not just funny because of what they said. They were funny because of how they made every scene feel different. They turned normal moments into unexpected ones. They changed the rhythm of the show. And they reminded viewers that anything could happen at any time. Even today, fans of Laverne and Shirley still remember the exact feeling of watching Lenny and Squiggy appear on screen. It was a mix of surprise, laughter, and curiosity. Actors like Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall often reflected on how much those characters changed the energy of the show. What started as a small idea became something much bigger than anyone expected. And that is the true story behind them. Not just comedy, but timing, trust, and the power of letting creativity take control. As time passed, the story of Lenny and Squiggy and Laverne and Shirley became more than just a sitcom memory. It became an example of how unexpected ideas can change an entire show. What started as a small creative experiment turned into something that shaped television comedy for years. Behind all of it was a simple truth: great comedy often comes from freedom. The creators did not try to force Lenny and Squiggy into a strict mold. Instead, they allowed the characters to grow naturally, even if that meant breaking normal sitcom rules. At the beginning, no one thought Lenny and Squiggy would become legendary. They were just funny guests with strange energy. But over time, their presence became something audiences looked forward to. Actors David Lander and Michael McKean gave the characters a unique identity. They did not rely on perfect lines or polished delivery. Instead, They focused on timing, expression, and interaction. That simple approach made the characters feel alive. They were not just written jokes. They were personalities. One of the biggest reasons for their success was trust. The producers, especially Gary Marshall, trusted the performers enough to let them experiment. That trust created space for creativity. I end many shows. Strict rules can limit what actors can do. But here, flexibility allowed something new to happen. Small risks on set often led to big laughs on screen. That balance between structure and freedom became one of the strongest parts of the show. The reactions of the main cast were just as important as the characters themselves. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall often had to react naturally to unexpected moments. Their real reactions added extra life to each scene. Instead of polished responses, viewers saw genuine surprise and laughter. This made everything feel more real and less scripted. That combination of planned chaos and real reaction created a unique viewing experience. Even years after the show ended, Lenny and Squiggy are still remembered as standout characters. They showed that side roles can become just as important as main characters when done right. Their influence can still be seen in modern comedy shows that use unpredictable supporting characters to break tension and add humor. The legacy of Laverne and Shirley is not only